Hey there! In today's video, I'm walking you through a monochrome watercolor painting tutorial. Creating monochromatic artwork is an excellent way for you to practice using different tonal values in a painting. So without further ado, let's get started. It's important to start off by first creating a value scale because a value scale shows us what the lightest tones are and what the darkest tones are. So to create a value scale, divide your paper into 7 boxes. Dilute the pigment to its lightest tone and paint it in the first box. Then slowly work your way across each box, and every time you're going to add a little bit more until you reach the opposite end of the value scale where the darkest pigment will be. Now that your value scale is done, you'll have a much better understanding of the range of tones that you'll be able to use in this monochromatic painting. In this painting, I am only using one color, and that color is violet. So to start off, I diluted the violet into its lightest tone. So as you can see here, I'm using this lightest tone to draw the outlines of mountain peaks. Once I have drawn the outline, I am then using the paint and I'm going to fill in the shape of those mountains. Then, once I have filled in the shape, I am taking a clean, damp brush and I am smoothing out and blending out the pigment. This will create a misty look so that these mountains that are in the background will have a misty mountain appearance. So once you're done blending out the pigment, I want you to go in one more time and add a little bit of extra pigment to the tips of the mountain peaks. This will just darken them a little more, and you'll see that it will create a nice gradient from the tip of the mountain that will be a bit darker to the bottom of the mountain, which will be lighter and show that nice misty appearance. For the second layer, you're going to take your violet pigment and you're going to add a little bit more of it to the mixing well. When you add a little bit more pigment, this will darken the overall tone. The reason that you need to do this is because objects that are closer to you in the foreground appear darker. So when we paint that second layer of mountains that are closer to us, it has to look darker. This will create more depth in the painting. So use the same technique that we used for the first layer, that's applying the wet on dry technique to paint the outline of the mountain peaks, and then you fill in the mountains with the pigment. Then take a clean damp brush, and just as we did with the first layer, you're going to blend out and smooth out the bottom of the mountains. Again, we want to create a bit of a misty appearance. When that is done, go ahead and add more pigment to the mountain tops, and then we're going to let this layer dry. Now for the third layer, you're going to add a little bit more of the violet pigment into the mixing well. This will darken the pigment and it will make it perfect for the third layer. So since this third layer is closest to the viewer, it needs to be the darkest. Now you need to draw the peaks of the mountains and then fill in the entire area with the pigment. We want one nice solid color. This time we're not going to use the clean damp brush technique to create some mistiness. We're just going to make sure that this layer is nice and even. So once you've laid down the color, I want you to add a little bit more of the violet to the mountain peaks, and once this is done, you're going to see a nice little bit of transition from darker peaks into a mid-tone in the middle of the mountain. Once this is done, all you have to do is let it dry, and then we are going to go work on the sky. When you paint the sky, what you need to do is first apply some clear water all along the upper portion of the sky. You can see with the paintbrush that I'm using circular motions to paint around one part of the sky. That's because in that area is where the sun is going to shine through the clouds. So you need to apply some diluted pigment, a very light shade of the violet, and you just need to dab it randomly throughout the sky. In this tutorial, I'm not trying to make the sky look super realistic, but rather it's supposed to have more of maybe an animated feel, something not super realistic, but still very whimsical and pretty to look at. You can see here I'm using a dry tissue paper, a little scrunched up piece, to dab certain parts of the sky that I want to look lighter. So those parts would be where the sunshine is shining through. So I'm going around the painting and I'm applying these little pops of color everywhere in a random manner. And then as you can see here, I'm using a clean brush with clear water and I'm just dabbing up some of the areas that are closer to the mountains because you need to be careful because you don't want the clouds to bleed into the mountains. They're very similar in color, so if you're not careful, you might lose them, and we don't want that to happen. So just be careful, work slowly around the mountains, add your little pops of color. As you can see up here, I added some more to the upper corner, the upper left and upper right corner to darken them. I wanted to add some more depth and variation in the sky. Keep adding a little more pigment until you're happy, and then when you're done, let the painting dry. Now, to finish up the sky, all I'm doing is adding a little bit more of the violet to certain parts of the clouds where I felt they could appear a little bit darker. I wanted a bit more high contrast in those clouds, but without the sky turning too dark because the main focus is supposed to be on the dark mountains at the bottom. Speaking of mountains, it's now time to paint the last and final mountain range. Because this mountain range is closest to the viewer, it will be the darkest. So load up your mixing well with some more violet pigment and make sure that this layer appears the darkest. Now, unlike the other layers, I'm going to paint a few thin lines in those mountains. So basically those lines are supposed to represent trees, but very, very distant trees. They're not very detailed, we're just giving the impression of trees. I'm revisiting the sky one more time just to add a little more pigment to deepen some of those values in the sky and create more contrast. So if you've been enjoying this monochrome watercolor tutorial so far, I'd really appreciate it if you gave this video a like because it helps spread this video to more like-minded artists. So add your last remaining bits of pigment into the sky, and once you're happy with the cloudy texture of the sky, let it dry and we will be painting the final thing, which are birds. We're almost done. The last thing that we need to do is paint some beautiful birds in the sky. All you need to do is take your paintbrush, and this time I recommend that you dip the bristles directly into the pigment because then the pigment will be nice and rich and it won't be very diluted. We want the birds to look dark so that they contrast against the light sky. So take your paintbrush and I want you to create little flicks in a V shape and also make little flicks in an X shape. This creates the illusion of wings that are flapping up and down throughout the sky. And all you have to do is scatter these birds throughout the sky. There's no pattern you have to follow. Make it random so that the flock of birds looks very organic. To create the most visual interest, make sure some of your birds are a little bigger, make others a little smaller, and also make sure that some of the birds are darker because they'll appear to be flying closer, and then make other birds look a lot lighter because they'll give the illusion that they're much further in the distance. Alright, now that we're all done, let's go to the final part. The easiest way to peel off the tape is to apply gentle pressure and slowly peel back the tape in the opposite direction. Do each piece one at a time, and then when you're done, you get to gaze upon your beautiful monochromatic painting. And there you have it. Your monochromatic watercolor artwork is complete. If you enjoyed this watercolor tutorial, I would really appreciate it if you liked this video and subscribe down below to my channel if you are looking forward to more watercolor tutorials and art videos. Now, I've got even more watercolor tutorials for you to check out, so I will see you in the next video.